Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 50, and we are talking about the bushcrafter's best friend, the knife. Now, this is a topic that comes up quite frequently in the
Oh,
bushcraft community, wouldn't you say, Ben?
oh yeah, it's a super popular topic amongst anyone who spends time in the woods, especially the bushcrafters. They some might actually spend more time talking about knives than actually using them.
And that is true. That is very true. But, yeah, it always seems to be a topic that pops up anytime you get into the bushcrafting conversation. It's always, what knife do you use? What do you think of this knife? Is such and such a good knife? And you know what? When it comes down to it, for me anyway, it's not so much company X. It's does it do what you want it to? And I think that's kind of what we were on the same page about talking a little bit here tonight. We will mention some brands, but it's more of a paintbrushy term than this is the specific brand. It just happens to be a brand that's associated with something. Kind of like the Mora, if you know what I mean. If I can hold it in my hands. This is my wife's Mora. This one comes up a ton in the bushcrafting community, and that's all we're going to use as the name in that kind of aspect, or at least me, yeah. So, but in any case, I think tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about functionality of a knife and what you should look for in a knife than is X knife a good knife. Is it kind of safe to say that, Ben?
Yeah, I'm missing a knife. Yeah, the functionality is a huge part of it. What are you using your knife for? Why are you carrying it? These are all important aspects to the whole knife world. But I lost a bit of my thought there for a second.
Well, I got my advertising done, so
No, I found it. I was missing a knife there for a second. It was like losing a child.
oh, it just throws your whole day off. I know, it's terrible.
I'm actually missing one. I have been missing one knife for quite a while, and I keep sticking my hands in couch cushions and stuff, thinking it's going to show up, and it doesn't. But yeah, like I don't go into woods without a knife. I don't think it's not something I consider. I don't actually go anywhere without a knife. The only exception I can ever think of is when I'm flying, and that's only if I have to go through security. I, I have flown a couple of times in with a private flight, so it was just me, pilot, and in those instances, it was perfectly fine to have your belt knife on with you. So I've even flown with a knife.
I've never flown in a plane with a knife. I've never flown in a plane with a knife.
Oh no, it's awesome. I just definitely isn't allowed to do it. But no, I mean it's a tool, and some people think, unfortunately, knives. I mean, they sometimes have a little bit of a negative connotation. Some people think of them as weapons. I don't think the bushcrafting world does. If I was being chased by an animal, I probably wouldn't jump to my knife as an immediate thought of protection. I don't know, would you?
No, you know what? First and foremost, I'd probably go after a stick or something like that because a knife is just so short ranged. Like you're basically the length of your hand, and even at that, if it's in your hand, like it's so close quarters. It would not be my first go because I think I'm just too big and slow. Nice long stick is where I'm at.
I'm kind of with you. I mean, I might use my axe or a stick. I often carry a hiking stick or something. I'd be much more adapt to using that as a weapon, I guess, if I had to. So the knife is a tool, and it does so much for you. I mean, we can look at it simply from the point of view of being a single blade, which a lot of the knives here, like the Moras, for the most part, are single blades. I've got a Groman style knife.
Funny enough, that's what mine was too. The one I showed you there earlier. That's a little Groman.
I think great little knives, wooden handle, leather sheath. It's a bit of a dangler design, so it just kind of flops around. I've salvaged a few knives over the years. I don't know about you, but sometimes knives end up with a bit of a history. And so,
I have a story knife coming up. Actually, funny enough.
so when I was a teenager, or maybe even a bit younger, my parents gave me a knife. They gave me a few knives over the years, but if I was going to spend time hunting and fishing and hiking and stuff like that, my parents thought I should have a decent knife. So they gave me a knife. Says Alice on it, or ALCE, made in Spain. It's a cute little knife. It used to have a black handle with a brass piece going through it, and it was a nice knife. And like the genius that I am, I thought it would be a really good throwing knife. It's not. And,
Funny how those on-balance knives don't work out so well.
So it stuck in a couple of times, but eventually the handle actually shattered way more than the blade took any damage. It's still fine. It sat in a drawer for years until I decided to see if I could put a handle on it. So I did. I shaped a handle. This one's maybe not a traditional shape for a handle, but it's one that I find to be quite comfortable.
But that's the beauty of it. I mean, it might not be traditional per se, and I didn't mean to cut you off just so we don't come back to it. Knives can be personal, and you can do little things like that suit you. That's the beautiful thing about a knife. It is a personal thing.
So I said that's one that I've recovered. I've managed to salvage, make it do what I want it to do, and I keep it around for sentimental reasons. And I do take it. I kind of made it a bit unique. But going from that, I mean, those are so far what we've had are more or less fixed blade knives with either a full tang or a most tang. You get sort of little tiny like skinning style ones. They're fairly common, but if you're skilled with these, you can do a lot of stuff with these you would do with the other ones. I find them not the greatest for carving. They're just not designed for it.
Yeah, kind of along the same note. That's kind of a little skinning knife, but I'm on the opposite side of that. I love this. This is actually my wife's knife, but
Yeah.
I love this little thing for carving. The jibbing on the back, it's nice and small for doing fine carving. I really like it. Very similar design in those. There we go.
This one's got a bit of a fatter belly, I guess. More of a swoop to it.
Yeah.
If it had a slightly straighter blade, I may actually like it a lot better for that. But it's a Winchester name. Probably picked it up at Walmart. I do like it because it's small and compact. But then we can talk about like folders.
Oh yeah, I got some folders here too. One thing I'd like to address just before we get right into the meat and potatoes off it, Ben, and you can do this just as well as I can. For anybody out there that may not be 100% sure on the terminology we're going to use, nothing is overly complicated. We're not going to try and swamp you with jargon, but there's going to be a couple things we say that might be important, such as full tang. Ben brought it up there a minute ago. So what full tang means is that the blade and the handle all kind of become one piece. That doesn't necessarily mean that the steel of the handle is the finished handle, but the full length of steel runs from basically the point to the butt end, and then the handle usually gets laminated over that. So that's what we mean when we say full tang. Then there's like a half tang, comes down half, quarter tang, comes into about quarter of the handle. And then there's some other things in there, but full tang is the big one you're going to hear. There's also some other terms that we're going to talk about, such as, and maybe we will, maybe we won't, but I've already mentioned one is jibbing, which is the kind of the indents you see on the back of the knife, and that's more for grip on your thumb. And I guess the last one might be serrations, and that one's pretty straightforward. And I don't actually have a knife. Yes, I do. So the serrations are kind of the most classically on the part of the knife that's closest to the handle, and they serve a purpose as well. I think they were more designed for cutting rope and stuff like that. Is that not the case, Ben? You might be a little more familiar with that than me.
Rope, it does a decent job on meat. That's why your steak knives are generally like a serrated style knife. It's cut through something that's more fibrous, I guess. But it doesn't create a nice smooth cut like going through wood, which is kind of fibrous, I guess. It doesn't, it leaves like that like wave look to it, and it it does affect control a bit. So it's, you know, take it or not. It's something that's on a lot of knives. I think that's one of the reasons I don't use this one as much as I would like, because I tend to really like using the bit of blade that's closest to my hand. I don't use the tip for a lot of carving and fine work. And if my bottom half of my blade is serrated, that restricts some of the use that I can get out of it. So,
and I tend to agree with you. I do have knives with serrations on them. They serve a purpose, but typically they're more on my folding knives, as you just seen. For my straight blade knives, like you, I just not a big fan. It seems to get in the way more than anything. Now, that being said, generally I always have a folding knife and some sort of straight bladed knife when I go off in the woods. You know, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Everybody must have heard that old term before. So that gives you the best of both worlds. And to complement that once again, generally I'd have my Leatherman multi-tool, which also has a knife on it, plus it has a full serrated blade on it as well, and a few other things, which kind of covers everything for you.
Yeah, so like I got a little Leatherman here. This one's ancient. I'm sure I bought this at an airport. At a sharp sale they do there occasionally. Because when you go to the airport and you try to fly with it in your pocket, they take it away.
Oh, for sure.
It goes away. Right? So I end up selling one. I've been a fan of the Gerber multi-tool, kind of like the whole sliding. The
one-handed style, and that's my Leatherman's very similar to that as well.
All right.
Well, kind of.
The Leatherman that I've always seen have been the butterfly style.
Yeah, they look up the Leatherman OHT, or one-handed tool. It has that snap-forward design. It was the only... Now, somebody's going to correct me on this, and please feel free, because my knowledge is not that gratuitous, but it was one of the only ones they made with that snap-forward design. I think Gerber did a better job of it anyway. Not knocking Leathermans by any way, shape, or form, but I do think Gerber did a better job with that, and I think the military still uses the Gerber multi-tools versus the Leathermans. So, and maybe I'm wrong on that too. Once upon a time they did. Maybe that's old news. I don't know. But
I can tell you what they did 20 years ago, and that was the Gerber. But since then, I have no idea if they've continued with that. And that's what got me originally into the Gerber multi-tools. The first one I got was an issued one. And I had bought one while I was waiting for the issued one. I ended up giving that to my father, and then I had to give back the issued one, so I bought another one. And I kept trading them back to Canadian Tire every time I snapped one, and eventually they told me they weren't doing that anymore.
It's a bugger when something good goes to wayside, isn't it? But
no, I mean, I love multi-tools because you do got your knife. I mean, that's true. Like, and this one here has the serrated edges and stuff. But you can get other things with it. You get little screwdriver bits. This particular one, I think I've shown this one before. This one actually takes like jigsaw blades.
Yeah,
so I can
did show that one before.
Stuff. And here's one tool that I find surprisingly useful. Is scissors.
Yes, I 100% agree. I got a little. I don't have it here because it's on the keys to my truck, but I have a little knife. And all it has is a fold-up knife and a fold-up pair of scissors. And I bet you I use that more than any other knife that I have.
All right.
Mainly for the scissors.
A little Leatherman micro. And it's, instead of pliers, it is just scissors.
I like that. But we slightly digress. So maybe multi-tools will be a good one to come back to. I think we did touch on that way earlier in the season. But anyway, knives. Sorry, we digress. That happens from time to time, but it's always interesting. So yeah, what's a good knife? What's a good knife for you? That seems to be the age-old question, and there is no right answer to that. The only real answer to that is what knife feels good in your hand and does what it needs to for you. So there are some things you can look for in knives. Overall size. That's a big one that a lot of people wonder about and a lot of questions that get asked about. Apparently Gerber still does the warranty. He just exchanged, and I should say Red Bear Tactical just exchanged a Gerber M600 a few years ago. No questions asked, just paid the postage. So all you gotta do is call Gerber themselves, apparently.
Oh, I should, because this one's busted.
Yeah, I think I got one here too that's broke, so maybe I will.
But they got away from it for a period. Yeah, this one's missing a whole blade. And I don't even remember what the blade was. It may have been a file, but it's gone, and I miss it.
Try giving them a call. I'm sure we can look that up after the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, so length or overall size of knife, and that is kind of a personal preference. There are people out there that like those big Bowie knives, and they can do carving with it, they can do feather sticks with it, they can do all that stuff with it, and they get along with it just great. Now me, I'm not so good with a gigantic knife. I believe a gigantic knife has a place, don't get me wrong, but it's not my I don't want to say my everyday carry, but my every outing carry, if you know what I mean. I prefer something a little bit more back in, and that's just simply because I feel I have more control with a blade. I don't mean a micro knife, but it's hard to say what your length of blade is going to be preferred. And the only way to really get into that is to try a few. Don't be scared to ask somebody while you're out there, hey, can I try your knife to see how I like it? I'm thinking of getting one, and I want to see if that length is somewhere happy. And I know somebody is listening to this conversation on the other side of my door laughing their guts out. So these are not double entendres, and we are talking about knives.
I thought you were talking about knives, but I was kind of concerned. You're going to let someone handle your knife? Like, seriously?
Anyway, but yeah, it's usually not that big a deal to. Oh man, this is going to sound just as bad, but play the field and see what's out there before you commit to anything, because a knife can be a major purchase or it could just happen upon you, in all honesty. Like knives, a good knife will come from the darndest spots, in all honesty. And that was kind of my little story I had with this one. This is a Winchester blade, which is just a straight edge. It's a little bigger than I like, but at the same time, this is a good, solid knife. It feels good in the hand. There's no jibbing on the back, which is something I generally like, but it's got a nice 90-degree spine. So the back of the knife is cut at a 90 degree. It can be used on a ferro rod. It's a little weightier than I normally like, but it seems to work for this knife. And the story behind this was a couple of years ago, I bought a four-wheeler. And I bought it from a dealership. This is the funny thing. I bought it from a dealership. I drove all the way to Amherst to pick this four-wheeler up. So it wasn't like drop notice, I bought it off the lot or something like that. So in any case, I bought this four-wheeler. It was a Honda, loaded it on the truck, got it home. Took it off the truck, went to clean it, because it was out in the yard, there was dust and stuff on it. So I wanted to clean it, and blah, 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 new toy, I wanted to be proud of it. And I went to clean out the toolbox. And in the toolbox was this knife, a set of toe straps, some contact information for the previous owner, and a few other personal items. So anyway, I dig all this stuff out, and I call a buddy up. I'm like, man, I just bought your old four-wheeler. Do you want this stuff back? And he's like, nope, keep it all. It's all good. Throw away or burn the personal stuff because it was paperwork. Keep the toe strap, goes with the bike, and the knife you might as well have because I threw it in there and never used it again. So when I got it, it was rusted, and I salvaged it and brought it back, and being a Winchester, I am ashamed to say, and when I say Winchester, I'm not picking on Winchester brand at all, but I mean being a Walmart branded knife, I did not have high expectations for this. And honestly, it's an amazing knife. And I still carry it with me a lot as my secondary fixed blade knife. I throw it in the front pocket of my backpack and just sits there in case my every outing carry just happens to, break, fail, get lost, whatever. It's kind of my backup. And that's what I mean. A good knife can come to you from anywhere. You must have a knife that has a good story behind it, Ben.
Not well. I mean, like that one. There's like the one I talked about earlier, paying for my father. My Mora that I carry, I was just on Facebook, and there was, I think it was a European Mora store. It just had a thing on there, share and like this, and you could win a knife. So I shared and liked it, and
you want a knife?
I won a knife. Well, I was pretty impressed with that. I don't win much. Like I don't have that kind of luck. this here tiny little one, I think I gave it to one of my girls. I found this and it was rusted shut. You couldn't open it. You couldn't do a thing with it. I found it in a driveway, carpool not far from here, and the blade was shot. And as you can see, it's well used.
It's very well used. That's worn down pretty good in the belly off it.
Yeah, but I cleaned it up, and it's pretty sharp. Like the blade's a bit wiggly, but it'll bite into your thumbnail quite quickly. So it's a cute little knife. Mom was a toothpick, really, for the size, but
like you said, perfect for a younger one just getting into bushcraft. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This little knife here, I made this.
And that was something I was going to bring up a little later in the show, but seeing we're on that topic, that is something else you do, Ben. You do have a little bit of experience making your own knives.
Yes, I've made a few. I by no means consider myself professional or overly skilled, but I rigged up my own little forge, and the steel I usually end up grabbing from, I've been told, is not necessarily the best steel, but I've had good luck with it. It's just radial saw blades, table saw blades, things like that. And files. I've made a few out of files. Works quite well generally. They say the older files are better. The newer ones are oftentimes case hardened and hard to put after you get through the meat. They may not ever harden well, but yeah, just it's a great fun because then you can really like figure out how do you want it to fit in your hand, how long do you want it. You can really play with and do what you want. You can come up with some unique designs. So I do enjoy that.
Gary just happened to pop on. He said two of his main knives are Triple X made in Nova Scotia. And funny enough, I was going to bring Triple X up, but as he followed up with it, it's recently shut down due to some health reasons of the owner and stuff there. And the only reason I wanted to bring Triple X up in here is because it is a Nova Scotia company. Groman has a location down there in Pictou. Triple X, I believe, was
Bridgewater Way.
Bridgewater Way, was it? And those are some local knife companies that make a great product. The downside of that is generally their knives are going to be a bit more pricey than what you would pick up, say, from Walmart or Canadian Tire or something like that. And that's not saying don't buy them because they're overpriced. It's just you are going to be at a higher price point there. But you are getting a little bit better quality of knife too. Doesn't mean it necessarily fits your needs or your hand or any of that better. But the quality of the steel, the craftsmanship, stuff like that tends to be a little more higher end. Probably hold an edge a little better. Probably comes with a Scandi gripe versus like a convex. But they might come with convex. It's hard to say. And I'm not going to get too much into edges, other than there are different types of edges, and if it's something you're interested in, you should look it up, because we could do an entire show just on that, I would think.
Yeah. I have a bit of a mixed opinion on custom knives. For example, yes, you may potentially get a much better temper. But as they're custom, they're generally one-offs. Their temper may not actually be consistent throughout their line of knives. If you pick up any two of their knives and brought it in and put it in a Rockwell hardness scale, you might find quite a variance within it. So that because they are more or less one-offs or small batches, there's a lot of time and effort put into it. You're going to have something that's relatively unique. You know, not everyone is going to have that knife. You can go out and find a dozen Moyer companions.
Yeah.
Any day. And the thing with the Moyer companion is you pick up a dozen of them, every one is going to be identical, unless somebody has modified it in some way, shape, or form after they received it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, you know, a mass-produced knife.
No, not at all. And that is kind of the thing with the Moras.
But I think that's all comes down, not so much even down to quality, although there is some of that. It's down to personal preference. If you want something that's very unique, if you want something that's that's designed more for you. You could go to a local knife smith. I mean, there's a few around the province that I've met and talked to, and they will make you an awesome knife. And like one guy I talked to, he actually said like if you came to him and asked for a knife, he would take into consideration everything you're doing, and he would design a knife for you for what you're planning on doing. And that's really good, except you now have a knife that's purpose built. And I want a knife generally that's all round built. So if you go to someone and say, I want a knife that's really good at cutting meat. Well, they're going to make you a knife that's great at cutting meat. It's not probably going to do great on wood. It's probably not going to be great for processing firewood. It may not be good for a whole bunch of other things like cutting rope. It's just not designed for that. So you have to take that into account. It's like you've used filleting knives, right?
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful knife for what it is.
Awesome knife for filleting.
Yeah.
Not much else.
Right? It has its purpose. The Mora knife, for example, like I'm going to come back to this a lot because this is a bit of like, all the other knives I have here. A lot of them I take and use. It's a really good all around knife. Blade isn't overly long. It's not super thick. It's not super thin. Yeah. The color difference is the only difference between these two. And mine has the little etching saying 125-year anniversary.
Mine is pink, and I bought it from a store that was closing.
Yeah. But I'm not a fan of batoning. I don't know, like maybe you are or aren't.
I usually carry an axe or I have a machete.
So do I. But anyways, I've batoned with this. I've had very good success with it. I have no sign of damage or shiny spots on the edge. I can put a good edge on it pretty quick. So, I'm not adverse to getting a nice custom knife. I presently don't have one. I can't personally justify spending $600-700 because a lot of them are in that range and more on something that I can pretty well do everything I would do with that with a $25 knife.
Oh, looks like you froze up there. There you go. Got you back. And there's the other side of custom knife making, and I don't want to mention no names, point any fingers, anything like that, because there's a lot going on, but you can get on the other hand. You pay a lot of money for a knife you never end up with. You know what I mean? So it's happened a couple times in my experience, but that's also kind of the risk you take, and that's also a good, just something to keep in mind.
Okay, even if you get the knife, though. So you go out, you spend $500 for a custom knife. You go and you pick the knife up and you love it. It's an awesome knife. You spent $500 on this knife. If you were to damage it, how is that going to make you feel?
Oh, by the time it's all said and done, chances are you'd probably never use that knife again. Custom knives tend to be fairly pricey and lengthy in the process. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the qualms I have with it. Like if I spend $500 on a knife, I'm gonna use it, right? And if I go out and use it and then I break it, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. You go back to the smith and say, listen, like you built me this knife, I really liked it, but now it's in two pieces, or now there's a big dent in it, it looks horrible, and he's going to look at you and you abused it, and you did potentially.
Well, I mean, I guess that gets into what is abuse. You know what I mean? Like, some people would say I abuse some of my knives. I say I use them to their full potential. So...
Yeah. I heard a couple of stories even in the last month or two. I talked to one guy and he talked about something, and I think I might want to curve my words in case I wasn't supposed to hear that story, but he used a custom knife for something it wasn't meant to do, and he broke it. And it was very upsetting to the owner of the knife and maybe the smith of the knife. So there is that. In the meantime, these are local, for lack of a better word, artisans. They're applying a craft. They're making an awesome product. And I very much do like the idea of supporting them. It's just for me personally, I'm not in a position where I can afford to fork out that kind of money when there's so much other kit I need that I know if I buy, I'm going to be able to use to its fullest potential
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy. So that's a huge debate. If you have all the gear you want and you've gotten to the point where you say, I'm tired of a knife, a plastic knife with plastic handle and a plastic sheath, that I want something more. I mean, you can go to like a Groman and bridge that gap a little bit. I mean, you can pick up a decent Groman for
Yeah, I
$100.
was gonna say anywhere between $100 and $200, you're getting a good knife.
Yeah. Um, and that's somewhere in between. I mean, this is a shop that makes a ton of knives. I mean, it's decent steel. You can get some options and stuff. Even with the Morris, though, you can get your carbon steel, you can get your stainless steel, you can get some options. Uh,
And while we're
Groman,
just talking about the options there, because I was going to bring it up, seeing you're going with it, you might as well tell us what is the benefit or difference between stainless steel versus carbon steel. Why is that an important thing to know in a knife?
I a lot of people used to like the carbon steel because, for one of the reasons, it's more traditional. And the other thing is, like, if you have a piece of flint, you can actually get a spark off a carbon steel blade. So you do it off the spine, and you can just strike it off. There's an advantage there. But they corrode. They're a high maintenance knife in that fact. I have a bunch of stainless steel knives.
This
They
one
have
is
no.
high carbon steel, and I never take it into the woods anymore because
Yeah.
as soon as I do, I have to take it home, I have to clean it up, I have to oil it. Not that it's a bad knife, I just don't want that labor. But anyway, you covered all the issues there.
This here is one I bought for my daughter. I think it's a more 811 or 511 or something. It's a carbon steel knife. I bought a carbon steel for myself. It just never showed up, which is a point of contention. Yeah, 511, basic 511. It's got a nice little finger choy, I think it's called. But they're carbon steel, and I mean, I'm constantly oiling the things, and I'm constantly finding little pits and stains on them. Kind of, to me, makes them a disposable knife. This one here is heavily pitted, stained differently. Creates its own unique look if you don't mind them not being in mint condition.
Well, Gary said it best. Dents add character. I'm
Yeah,
perfect condition is all good and dandy, but it doesn't look like it's ever been used. I'm a firm believer in get something that you can use and that you enjoy using. And that's why we keep talking about these Mora knives. And you heard us say it a few times now, and I did say it was going to be the only one I mentioned a straight up name and recommendation to. If you are new to knives and you want a starting point, without them backing us in any way, shape, or form, this is a good place to start. The Mora knife. It is generally very cheap and very well made for the money you pay. I think I bought this one for 10 or 15 bucks for mil, maybe 20 tops. And I mean,
yeah.
as Ben said, at that price point, it's almost a disposable knife, but they take a ton of abuse. There's forums online about how to modify these with Ranger bands and stuff like that, like Mod Your Mora, I think it's called, and stuff like that. It's a good place to start with what you want. Maybe it'll be the last knife you ever buy. Maybe it'll be the first knife in a long line of knives like the rest of us, but it's a good starting block.
And they have quite the range. They have the little, I think it's Elgris, which is the little tiny, like almost a neck knife style. They have the Garbage, which I keep thinking garbage, but it was one of their Bushcraft knives that they came out with. That one sells for, I think, close to $100, or if not more. Light My Fire, I think, sold one for $35. I think it was a Mora knife, but it has the ferro rod built in the handle.
Now, I don't know if this is still accurate, but if anybody is near a Winners, I was in there a couple weeks ago and I seen them clearing out of the local one here in New Glasgow for $15 or $19. The Mora Light My Fires.
Oh, yeah? If I had known that, I would have told you to pick me up a couple.
Well, if I can get out of the dang house, I'm going to go back and see if there's any more. So, anyway.
But no, it's yeah. So I mean, those are some good options because it's a relatively cheap knife. I did some research on more a while ago, and I guess one of the things they kind of started from was they made a lot of knives for industry for like carpenters and electricians and stuff, and it was kind of our equivalent, the Swedish equivalent of the Olfa style or whatever, like
The Exacto blade, razor
the
exchange, something
yeah,
or other.
that's kind of the market they were designed to fit in. Like they were mass produced, punched out, and it was more or less you could use it until it got too dull, and you just tossed it
Tear fit and
aside and
bought a new
grab.
one.
But it became really popular because of the relatively cheap price point, the fact that it had a durable sheath. It had a lot of things going for it. And if you're going in the woods and you're beating on something, it's nice. Like you don't have to worry too much about it. So there is
Yeah, if
that
you're ever
advantage.
worried about breaking your knife, grab a Mora. Chances are you're not going to break it, and if you do, you can buy a new one for next to nothing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, for the price of a campsite for the night, you can pretty well replace it. So, in that regards, I do consider it more or less disposable. If I went for a backwoods camping trip, the one I did over the weekend, I actually am out over $30 on stuff that I damaged or lost as a result of the trip. Bit of a story there, I guess.
Maybe next week we'll talk about recent camping trips. Just
But
well. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, but yeah, it's a great little option for knives and stuff. I I don't think it matters too much the type of knife you have. It's that you can do what you want with it. So you do want to practice with any knife. You want to get some skills. Figure out the type of work you're planning on doing when you're leaving. You don't know what you're going to do. You may get out there and decide to do something totally different. That happens to me more often than not.
Because I don't
But
think that I've ever gone out and plans haven't changed.
yeah, right. You get out there. Something that's is great to practice. I think if Rob Young is listening to us, he might actually chime in on this one. Is tent pegs. How often have you made a tent peg with a knife?
With a knife?
Yeah.
Maybe a handful of times. I don't put a whole lot of effort into a tent peg. I usually just find a Y branch and kind of put the one slice down it and jam it into the ground. I'm very low tech.
But I mean, I don't go in super detail, but like if I've lost, damaged, or just need an extra tent peg to tie down my tarp or fix my hammock or whatever, grab a piece of hardwood, sharpen one end, flatten the other end, and just drive it into the ground. It's a dead simple thing. Anyone should be able to pretty well make a quick and dirty tent peg with a knife. You can do that with any knife that's on my table right now. I'm right down to the little tiny, basically a toothpick. I can whip out a little tiny usable tent peg with that with little effort. And from there, I mean, you can get to much more fancy. I mean, I think I've seen you try to do it before. Whip out like a little spoon or a knife or a eating tool.
Usually a paddle. I don't make spoons. I make paddles because they're easy.
Yeah. So, but along that line, it's like mostly we think of a knife, we think of a straight blade, or a curved blade, as in like line the edge. But I have a carving knife now.
Oh, it's actually hooped a little.
Yeah, it's spooned. In fact, not only do I have that one, but it's actually got quite a lot of little shapes to it.
Now that's quite the little knife.
Yeah, it also has in it a gouge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is based off of what is it? Flex Cut, I think is the name. They made one that was rather expensive. It was way more expensive than I wanted to spend. So it was like 150 or 100 and something dollars. I didn't really want to spend that on a carving knife. And I heard about this one. This is the old timer, or Schrade Splinter, maybe it was called. You got the Google guide here, right?
Yep. Bringing her up now. See what I can find. Schrade Splinter. Looks like the Schrade Splinter.
Yeah.
Just doing a quick image search here.
The other one I think is
Schrade Old Timer 240T is
Yeah.
the other name for it.
Yeah. But if you look up that same one, if you look under, I think it's Flex Cut, Jack. Its advantage is the blades are lockable.
Mm. Pocket jack carving knife. Yep.
What's it called?
Yeah, it's called Flex Cut Pocket Jack Carving Knife, is what it's coming up as.
So that's a beautiful knife. And how much is it going for there now?
Let's see. This is American.
Yeah.
Quite expensive, 150.
Yeah. And a lot of guys, think people who buy it will tell you that worth every penny, and I'm sure it is. But this Schrade one, I think I bought for about 35.
Let's see. So I'm looking at the old timer right now, for what it's worth, and it's going for $32 American.
Yeah, Schrade Old Timer, same company.
Yep.
Right. So, anyway, yeah, beautiful little knife. It's great. I take it. It oftentimes goes in a side pocket on my pack, and when I'm in a campsite and if I have some extra time or I'm just at the fire, this is the type of thing I'm going to pull out, and I'm going to try and do something a little fancy, a little bit different, just to work on my skill set. I'm not saying you can't do that with any knife. You can sit there and whittle and play, but having those different types of blades and stuff really gives you a bit of fun, I guess.
Now, how do you find that to sharpen, Ben, if I can ask? All those little gouges and stuff?
For the most part, I haven't had too much trouble. It does take a bit of skill. If you look around enough, there's actually a carving piece of wood you can buy. So it has all the shapes more or less in it. Mm. And I think you just lay a piece of really fine sandpaper in it and you drag it through those grooves. I don't have that, so I have like this little ceramic rod, I have a little diamond stone, and I have to play around with it. So I may have offset the cutting angle a little bit over what was originally intended, but I'm trying to stick as close to it as I can. So I lay my edge on it and try and really get a feel for it and sort of stick with it.
I was able to pull the Old Timers 240T up for $48.99 Canadian with free shipping on Amazon.ca right now.
Yeah, like I said, I think I got mine for less. It was on sale. When they first came out, they varied a lot. Actually, when I first looked at them, they weren't even available in Canada, and a handful of people were sort of selling them, buying them in the States and reselling up here. Mm. And they were really price gouging early on. But now it's not been too bad. Keep an eye on it. I think it'll go down for a little bit.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Something I wanted to bring light to, and a lot of people will probably laugh at me for this. You ever have one of these, I called it a Tonto point, but I've also heard it called a K-bar point. And Red Bear Tactical actually brought it up too. And this is just a folder. But I actually love that little slight variation to give me the two different cutting angles. And I find it's...
I completely froze up there for a second.
Yeah, for 2 seconds. But anyway, yeah, so I like having the two different blade angles to be able to cut with. It still has some... Yeah, it's a unique experience all on its own, and I recommend everybody at least tries it. I wouldn't commit to it until you see if you like it or not. Because once you get the hang of it, is it ever nice to do fine little work with? Because I choke up on it much like this, and then I can take that little flat piece and I can get in and just do some real nice fine work with it. But anyway, just food for thought for people out there. So we are running a little later in time there, Ben. Let's talk about a little bit about knife maintenance, and if you're good with it, moving on. Maybe sharpening, some maintenance, some carries, some sheaths. We still got a few things to hopefully cover off there. So let's jump right into it with sheaths, because that's a big thing right on the back of the knife itself. There's a lot of different materials out there for sheaths. As with the Mora, you get a plastic sheath, which is great, but it does have its limitations. They're prone to crush breaking and impact breaking a little bit, and the cold weather does not help with that sometimes. But you can also get something like this, which is what gone, but that was Kydex, wherever that happened to end up. I think it's under my desk, but anyway, that's Kydex. Here's a piece of the backing, but and that's something a lot like plastic, but it's not as prone to the freezing and snapping that ABS plastic is.
So I have the cheap version of Kydex, which is PVC piping on this knife. And I did it myself. I took a couple of foam blocks, a couple of vices, and I went to Canadian Tire, I think it was, and bought some vacuum tube, 4-inch vacuum tube. Flattened it all, heated up with a heat gun, flattened it out, put my knife inside of it, closed it up, and shut it down with a bunch of rivets all the way around. Feels an axe similar to Kydex. You can kind of create that snap.
And that's how, I don't have it with me, but if anybody has seen my machete, that's what I've done with it. I've made a case out of plastic, much like Ben did. Ben did a lot better job, but same kind of idea. And it is something you can do to replace cases or sheaths that may have gone the wayside.
Yeah. One of my favorite is leather, personally.
And I agree. I'm a big fan of leather. My wife's little Groman has that dangler style. And this is one that I actually had done locally from one of our local artisans. As Ben said there, this is done by Jamie Harris. And you can see, it's on the back there. His logo. And did marvelous work. But wonderful leather sheath. And I really like this leather because it's super durable, as most leather is. But the one that came from him was nice and thick. And it seems like it's going to last a nice long time. And I mean it. He did a real nice job of this.
Yeah, so with the leather, you do have some maintenance. I mean, the other thing is like this is just a nylon, relatively cheap. I find they last really well until they don't.
Mm-hmm. Even worse than that is when you get this. The nylon with the plastic insert in it, if you can see that at all.
Well, that's what this one has.
Yeah, it's great until it doesn't, like you said. And the plastic insert could go, or the nylon could go, or the rivets could go. it's a bag.
So this one here's got a wood sheath on it.
And that's one you made as well?
Yeah. So I took a single piece of wood, I split it down the center, I carved out the shape of the blade, and then I put some paracord inside of it, so when it goes inside, it actually creates a bit of a friction hold. So it's relatively solid. Now, I really think it won't hold it super well.
Yeah, but I mean, all sheaths are going to have their limitations.
Yeah. And I just wrapped this with paracord and have a big dangler style. And I have a loop designed for it. So again, it's just a different idea. I was told that you could do that. I've seen some people make them out of birch bark too over the years. That was kind of neat.
Yeah, there's some great YouTube videos on that. Love to try it.
Yeah. Really, the sheath is there to protect the knife and protect you from the knife. It does, it allows you to carry the knife safely. With leather and stuff, you're going to want to oil it or, give it some kind of leather treatment. With your plastic, there's nothing you can do with it. It's going to last till it doesn't. I don't find them too bad in the cold, personally. I
No?
haven't had very.
My old one, not Mel's, I don't know with hers, but my old one, I was out and it was like minus 32, minus 35, something like that with wind chill. I mean, it was cold. And
Yeah.
it shattered on me. So it might have been a bad sheath.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's very well possible. Have you seen this with the Mora knives? You get a couple of them. Not all of them can do this, but
Oh, and they stack together. Somebody else had mentioned that too. So what would be the benefit of stacking up Mora knives?
why you would want to stack two identical ones, I don't know. Knife fights, I guess. But if you had a couple of different style knives that had the similar type sheath, the same locking capability, then I actually see quite a use for it, because you could have one that's maybe done with like a really fine edge for detailed work, one with maybe a thicker edge for when you're doing like wood processing, stuff like that. I could see some purpose to it, and then you just have to remember to always put
The right knife back in the right sheath?
otherwise you. But yeah, there's things like that. I mean, there's some different options out there to how they've built some of these things. So it's it varies. Some sheaths have compartments. I've seen ones that hold sharpening stones, ones that held ferro rods, ones that hold like a marlin spike.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different things you can get on them. Most of mine are pretty dead simple. You mentioned Ranger bands and modifying. Oftentimes on the Mora knives, that's what they do, is they put a couple of Ranger bands on the sheath, in fact, and then stick things inside of them. So you can.
And if anybody's wondering what a Ranger band is, picture a bicycle tube cut into rubber bands. That's a real cheap Ranger band, for lack of a better word. I won't beat that one too much. That's the simplest version I can give.
The one I seen today, someone I had on Facebook, was actually using lobster claw elastics. Those cold weather. They make a good job. But it's just a thick, strong elastic that you can wrap around something, your hiking stick, your nice sheath, and hold things in place. Comes in handy for things. But other than that, sheaths don't take a lot of.
No, just something to be aware of. There are different things out there. Red Bear Tactical said he likes the look of leather, but they do wear out. Gerber knives have a rubberized plastic sheath, and they hold up really well. Now, I don't think it was Gerber. I ended up getting one of those less shroud knives a while back, and I don't have it in here. I think it's out in the garage with my other stuff. But it had a sheath that was quite like that, and at no fault of the knife, it was probably the nicest part of the whole knife setup, to be honest with you. The sheath was wicked. The knife was good, don't get me wrong, but it had its issues. But yeah, so that's kind of it for sheaths. Just be aware there are different options out there, and that may be something you want to keep in mind. Now, something that might be... It's definitely something to keep in your mind, but it's not an overwhelming factor, because most knives come pretty standard, but there are a couple different carries that you can do with your knife. And unfortunately, the one I was going to show you with, I threw behind the desk. But in any case, the simplified version of this is, there's the standard carry, which is it would hang off your belt to the side, and you just retrieve your knife from it like that. If you happen to be left-handed, you can flip these around. Your knife may come out in the opposite direction. So be it, but you can get them that are left-handed as well, so if that's something for you, keep that in mind. You can get something that's called a scout carry, so instead of having it straight up and down on your side, it would be more... Now, when I scout carry, I carry it on my left-hand side, and it would sit like this, like sideways on your hip. And that just retrieves straight out the front. And the idea behind that is it's tucked into your waistline a little bit more, so if you're up and down a lot, you're sitting, standing, it tends to not get in the way as much. I also do a scout carry straight on my back and I really like that one for a scout carry, but it makes it very awkward to retrieve the knife and place the knife back in its sheath, but it does a great job of keeping it in your way. And something else is what Ben just shown over there is a neck carry, and this is very popular for a primary or secondary carry with a lot of bushcrafters. It gives you a knife at the ready at all times. The thing with one carrying on your side is if it falls out, you may not notice it, and that is kind of a drawback to some leather sheaths. They might not hold it as well as you want, but a neck knife's always there. I always use danglers or neck knives. So Gary's saying he's always using danglers or neck knives, and dangler is just another method of side carrying, for lack of a better method. But the neck knife one is very, yeah. So that'd be kind of a dangler one. It has an elongated hanging area, much like this one. It's not straight up and down. This is for that knife that I threw, but it's not straight up and down like this and rigid. It tends to dangle, thus the name. But I do like the neck carry as well. I don't actually have a neck carry knife. It's something on my list of things I want, and I'd like to get a nice short one. That tends to also be the other thing with the neck carries. They're generally shorter bladed knives. You don't, maybe you do, but most people don't want an 8-inch knife hanging around their neck into their chest line. But those are just some carries to think about. There are a few other ones out there, but those are the most common. And just something to keep in mind if you are in the market for a knife. Just think about it. What do you want? This is just one of those things that if you tailor it to what you want, it's going to make your knife that much more of a personalized experience for you, and that much more of a, you're getting that much more of what you want out of that tool. Does that make sense, or did I just go crazy?
No, I think you got it. Yeah, when you can walk again, you should come down and I'll help you out with that neck knife thing.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to hold you to that. When I can walk again. If anybody's wondering, I've been laid up for 2 weeks now because I busted my foot. So Ben's been letting me know of all the wonderful adventures he's been having on 2 feet. But
hey, well, you got something. Yeah. So yeah, you got your sheath now. We've talked a bit about blades, and we've even got into the multi tools. We've talked a little bit about maintenance when we mentioned like the carbon steel knives need to be kept well oiled and stuff. All of them should be clean. But the big thing with a knife, and we did talk briefly on it, was just sharpening. We talked about it with my my carving knife, and there's kind of 2 or 3 things to keep in mind when you want to think about sharpening. There's just like basic edge maintenance, and you can over sharpen a knife. You can ruin a knife by sharpening it, believe it or not. I'm going to see if you reacted to that.
no, I fully believe that. You can. My 2 cents on that, and maybe I'm coming from a different angle than you, is just that if you incorrectly put the angle on it, regardless of how much you sharpen it, it may never hold the edge you want it to. So if you sharpen away and sharpen away and sharpen away and ruin the angle of a knife, no matter how much you sharpen it, it's never going to stay sharp or be sharp again. Kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah. So you don't sharpen a knife unless it's actually dull or dulling. And you need to keep the knife sharp enough to do the tasks you're at. So if you start finding your knife is sort of like not digging in, or it's starting to slide, then it's no longer producing the task it's supposed to. If you have to push on it a lot harder than you used to, the example I would give here is you're skinning an animal, because that's a good one, and all of a sudden you're really pushing to get it to do what it was doing before with like a light draw, then you're risking the risk of injury or damaging the work you're working on. So that's the time when you want to touch it up. If you have like this little ceramic rod and you haven't let it go too bad, you can usually touch it up quite quickly with something like that. If you get to the point where you've hit, say, some bone, or you've chipped it against a hard knot on a piece of wood or whatever, if you're cutting against something, rarely the thing you're cutting is what really dulls your knife. It's what it goes against on the other side. With your cooking knives, It's your cutting board that does more damage to your knife than anything you've cut through. Does that make sense to you?
No, 100%, because generally it's the hardest thing it's coming in contact with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. At one point, I had I'll call it an internship for Cutco knives.
Mm.
You ever heard of Cutco knives?
I actually have. It's been a while, but I have.
And they're patented double D edge.
I think it was Red Bear Tactical, and he was talking about his K-Bar knife. He said it had a 2D steel, or D2 steel, or double D steel, or something like that. So, anyway, sorry.
That's a different thing, but
oh, okay.
The double D edge on a Cutco knife is, instead of straights, it's basically a whole bunch of three-edged cutouts. So it's got three cutting surfaces, and the straight at the point isn't actually kept sharp. It's the three blades inside of it. So you have three cutting edges. That's the double D, and yeah, it's a neat concept. And basically, they guarantee their knives to be pretty well sharp forever. If they ever dull, you can actually send them back. They'll resharpen them. They'll clean up the handles, and they'll send them back to you for the price of shipping, I think. So it's a neat little gimmick they have, if you want to call it a gimmick. Yeah. Once you get to the point where you've done more damage, now you're going to something a bit more aggressive, like your whetstones. You probably got a coarse side and a fine side. Mine is like 8 feet over there, so I'm not going to get it. Or I have like a little diamond stone, and that's where you start off. You find your edge, and I'd love to be able to really show it, but if you put your knife down flat and you lift it up till it's just starting to almost pivot against the edge, so you know that it's kind of flat against the existing shape, then you can put down with some relatively good pressure, and you draw it across the surface, and you do it an equal number of times per side. And then as you go further and you get into it, then you bring it back so it's barely the weight of the knife that you're dragging across, and that's polishing the finest edge on it. And then, I don't know, how do you check yours? I know some people shave the back of their hand. Other people,
I do a little bit of hair testing, but mine, that's more just to see if the blade's consistent. Same as this whole thing here. This drives me. The whole paper slicing thing, like, that's all good and dandy, but where in the woods are you going to cut paper? Where in the woods do you do this? Like, it makes no sense. Now, what this does do for me is you can go down, and if you just drag it slightly, you can find any imperfections in the blade, because it'll grab in those areas. And that's about the only time I want to see a piece of paper come around a knife. But that's my own personal pet peeve. Some people swear by this slicing paper method.
I see a lot of people use like their fingerprints. You drag the edge of your thumb across and feel it like going into your finger, the print in your finger. I'm not sure that really tests much. You can like get a little bit of a feel for it. The one I've been liking lately is, and this knife's a good example of this, is you put it against your thumbnail and just try to drag it. And if it's kind of resists moving, then it's pretty sharp.
Okay.
But as I get close to the tip of this knife, it'll actually slide quite easily. Like, it doesn't actually bite, so it means the tip of this knife is actually fairly dull, but the belly is actually really sharp.
And that actually happens a fair bit, because most people the tip gets hit the most on the unknown, if that makes any kind of sense. If you're slicing wood away from you, hopefully, and that knife happens to go a little bit away, it's going to be the spot that hits the ground or the tree or the rock or the whatever, right?
Well, and with this one, as my spine is pretty well the same thickness most of the way up through, the tip is actually generally a bit thicker of material. Like, my bevel didn't stay super consistent. It's because this is a fully handmade knife. and it does have some problems. And it means I need to work a bit more on the tip of this one than I do in the belly, because I got nice low angle all the way through, but then the angle actually steepens out a bit as you get towards the tip. So that's why it doesn't have the same edge. It's actually a tougher edge. So if I was going to do a lot of pressure, I'd actually use the tip, where my belly is the sharper spot. So for my use, it works well. But I see it.
We're treading into uncareful ground there again.
Huh?
It's a dirty topic. What can I say? I know Melissa must be over there laughing her guts out. We were talking something else the other night, and she was roaring about what we were talking about. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, the other we're gonna skim over that. The other option that you guys have available to you for sharpening, and I like these for on the fly in the woods, is something like this. A lot of people are going to hate me for this. Oh, those are terrible. You know what? They're good for what they are. They give you a good workable edge with zero knowledge of sharpening. Because you don't need to know your angles or anything like that, because the angle is set in there. That is also a drawback. You are limited to that one angle. But these give you a nice workable edge. And if you carry a leather belt with you in the woods, which you should to keep your pants up, but as well, you can do a little bit of stropping. And in conjunction with one of these, you can come up with a real nice edge. Once you get back home, then you can break out something like, a Lansky kit or a Whetstone or a Work Sharp or a few other ones there that may give you a better edge. But this, for what it is, I think it's $10-12. You can't beat those to throw in your bag and keep your knife workably sharp.
So, Camulus? Is it Camulus?
That's the one that actually made that Les Shroud knife, Camulus.
Yeah. So this one's kind of interesting. It has the pre-grooved. There's a carbide one and then a ceramic one for the final work. So you just drag your knife through it. It does work, and then it's got a nice. You can sort of polish it yourself section, and then there's the angled section, so you can put the blades in and find your angles. Yeah, I have a few of these. I do use them occasionally. They're not my favorite method, but yeah,
no, they work. They serve the purpose. Sorry, I got a little distracted there myself. They do their purpose very well, especially with limited knowledge. Now, I have seen myself so hard up that I've actually used a rock to put an edge on, not a knife, but an axe. One of these little round rocks, this sedimentary stuff, it will work. It'll give you a workable, and I stress workable edge, but it's better than nothing. So yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Have you ever used the window, the car window trick?
Not a car window. I have used the bottom of a ceramic cup.
I've often used ceramic cup.
I do that a lot at work.
I said I do that a lot at my office. I'll be at work, I'll take a knife out, and I'm sharpening on the bottom of my cup.
Yeah, people just walk in and go, "What the hell are you doing?" And you're just like, "Nothing."
Well,
and then they walk out, and everybody calls you crazy.
It's not a new thing for me. So, if many years ago, I was going to university.
Many years ago.
It was like 20 years ago. I'm an old man now. You know that.
Actually, you know what? It's 15 since I've gone.
So anyways, when I was going to university, I had a thing for knives back then. And back then, the flea markets on Sundays was a big thing. I used to go up to the mall in the Village Mall in St. John's, and there was 4 or 5 guys selling knives all the time. Big tables full of knives, and all kinds of other things, like some biker paraphernalia and all that. So every time I go up, for $5 to $15 to $20, I'd buy myself a knife. So that was fine. Hazing was a really big thing back then, or froshing as they like to call it. Mm-hmm. So they'd come in. The big thing was they wanted to bowl you, which was to take your head and put it in a toilet and flush the toilet. Not a thing that I thought favorably of. And I was just after coming back from basic training with the reserves, so I didn't consider myself a pushover. So I flat out refused to ever get bowled. And one day, I guess some of the senior guys kind of thought, hey, we're going to get bent. So they came down to the hall and they kicked my door in. And they probably could not have chose, no matter how hard they tried, a worse time to do it, because this was the day I had decided to sharpen all the knives I bought up to that point. So I had 40 knives laid out on my bed, and I had a couple of sharpening stones laid out, and I'm sharpening the knives, just sitting there on my bed with all these knives laid out like a complete psychopath, sharpening them up. And these two guys that were probably psychopaths kicked the door in, screaming, "We're gonna bowl you today, Greenie." And I just looked up, and I'm like, really? As I drew the knife over the sharpening stone. And the two of those guys backed up so quick and just left. And I don't think they ever did try to bowl me again after that. I think that was the end of it. That guy is insane. So that is my story, and I didn't.
I don't think I ever got hazed going to. No, I'm just trying to think. I don't think I ever got hazed going to college. I only went to college, to the Nova Scotia Community College, so it wasn't a big thing with us. We did pub crawls. That was it for us. You just got drunk for the stretch of Halifax or whatever it was.
So, I didn't in college either. It wasn't a college thing, because I was a university dropout, I guess, or financial dropout for university. It would be more precise. But I stayed in residence in Munn, and in residence was where the froshing really happened.
Yeah, I could see that. I refused to live on campus anywhere I went. I like my personal space.
It was kind of a very awesome experience, and I don't regret it at all. But there was a few things there that, some people would frown upon and stuff. And
funny enough, I don't mean to cut you off, but nowadays I doubt they'd let you onto campus with that many knives.
Oh, probably not.
I don't think you'd get in there with any more than a pocket knife if you're lucky.
Well, I was reservist, and there were certain parts of my kit were required. Like I had my multi-tool, I had all my camping gear and stuff. All that was stored in a room with me. I didn't have anywhere else to keep it. We had tools and stuff. Like, I don't know, like, here's your living thing, but yeah, you probably wouldn't be walking around campus with knives hanging off your belt or anything. But a lot of us did. We went camping. A buddy of mine, I can remember we sat one day in one of our rooms, and we were looking out the window, and we seen a tree way in the distance across the city and up on a park, and we said, we're going to walk straight to that point. We walked through a ton of woods. We found all kinds of weird and wonderful things just walking through the woods like that. So, it's kind of into that sort of things even back then. But no, I don't know how they would deal with that. I really don't.
I'm not sure. So we are at the 1 hour, 15 minute section. So we should probably wrap it up for tonight. Do you think it's worth coming back to this topic, or have we beat this horse dead?
Oh, I don't think next week it's necessary something, but we can come back. We'll talk about, especially if we could get really into these multi-tools and stuff.
I would love to do an episode on multi-tools alone, in all honesty. What do you guys out there think? Anybody that's listening, let us know. Same as always. Get a hold of us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, of course, what we're on now. Shoot us messages, drop us comments, all that good stuff. You search Atlantic Bushcraft or Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures on all of those, you're going to find us. And, of course, if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. And why is that, Ben?
Why? We're awesome, and you want to. No, every time we... Oh, no, there's a contest. Yes, so we are fast approaching. You're at what, 41 now? Or?
We are at 50. We only have one episode left, and then we're going to be drawing.
Okay, so 50. We're episode 50. We got one more, and then 52. We're doing the draw, and I will be here for that episode.
Oh, there we go. We weren't sure originally, but
That was a little up in the air, but right now it looks like I will be here. So kind of excited for that. We do need to potentially have a chat in the future before we do that. But yes,
yep.
Everyone subscribe, hit the bell if you want. I really, it's up to you.
I don't even know what hit the bell means, so do it, don't.
If you hit the bell when we upload something, the bell goes off, I guess, and you'll put it right away. Otherwise, it just goes under feed. So it's up to you. I have a video I have to edit that I did last weekend. Went out on a lake, did some camping, had some fun. So hopefully I will get some of that out shortly. Not a lot of talking, so you get you a break. You can just look at my great face and my camping gear, not have to hear my voice.
And that's what we all want. That's for picking on me about my foot.
I'd say come over and kick my ass, but you can't.
I can't even hop over and kick your ass. But anyway, yeah. Be sure to check us out on all our video methods. If you're a audio listener, if you're a video listener and you'd like to catch up on the podcast, driving to work or while you're doing your workout or anything like that, be sure to check us out on the audio sharing side, which is the iTunes, the Spotify, Google Music, and basically any other podcasting services out there right now. We are also now on TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Pandora, which are the three big ones we just hit. So we are searchable and findable now on all your smart devices at your home. So you can find us on the Google Minis and the Google Homes. You can find us on the Alexas. You can find us on Siri. I think that's what the iOS one is Siri, is it not, Ben?
Yeah, I believe so.
Anyway, you can find us on all of that stuff now. So be sure to check us out. Subscribe to us. Get into that draw. And hopefully we'll see you back here next week when we talk about something else that's great.
For sure.
As you just eerily stare into the camera as you're sharpening on a knife. I can see how the university days went for you, Ben. Anybody that's just listening, it's worth coming back and watching just the end of this episode for that. All right, everybody. Get out there.
Maybe I am a psychopath.
I don't know about psychopath, but you come off as a little intimidating, maybe. Psychopath might be a strong word. Maybe it's a weak word. Who's to say? But yeah, get out there. Be safe, but have fun. And let us know about it. Anyway, Have a good night, everybody.
Night.